This is my Redcat RDS, and in this video, it is custom chassis parts time. Shout out to my buddy who's investigating making some custom chassis for the Redcat RDS. He sent these to me just so I could check them out and see how they do. We're going to be comparing how does this chassis that he's made, how does it look, how does it compare, perform versus the standard chassis. So what we're going to do is first get the body off and start doing just some side-to-side comparison of what does this look like versus the one that's in there. I got the car flipped over because what I want to look at first is this main chassis, and I want to line it up. I'm assuming that all of these mounting screws back here are actually in the same spot. But it's good to make sure of that. So yeah, I can line it up here and I can see all of that. So it looks like the geometry and everything back here in the back of the chassis is the same. I have a couple extra little screws here. All of these screws line up. Couple right here. So it looks like for the most part all the screws line up. This chassis back here being the same dimensions, I have no issues with whatsoever. It kind of tapers in right here. It's actually a little bit wider, right? The factory chassis is very narrow in this one little spot. And if you do like I have, where you've actually disconnected it up here and you don't have any connection on this side, that actually is a place that allows for a little bit of flex. This is now going to be just that hair wider right there. So I'm assuming it's actually going to be a little bit stronger and a little less prone to flex, although there's not a lot of material there. So maybe once we get everything installed on it, maybe it'll be similar. The other thing to note is you notice how much narrower the chassis is right here in this spot, right here on the sides. That is great for me, as I only ever run the shorty batteries. But if for whatever reason you were looking to run a full-size battery, then maybe that would cause you some issues. We do have a couple extra mounting holes. I believe these are there so you can actually move the battery back further, which is pretty cool. Nice to add some even more rear grip to the car. I would say then the only thing that I have any kind of concern about with this piece as I look at it is right up here. All these screw holes line up beautifully. That's great. But what I notice is this chassis is actually slightly wider than the factory chassis. And what I don't want to get into is a situation where this control arm is actually hitting the chassis on the downstroke. I want that chassis to be able to sit. I want it to be able to transfer weight and lift up as high as possible, which means that control arm is going down. When it does, I want to make sure it doesn't hit there. And this chassis is just a little bit wider in that spot. So as we swap over to it, we're going to have to watch because we don't want that to be the limiter on our front suspension there. On the top side here, he provides a different top deck. Honestly, it doesn't look like it's going to end up being that much different based on just where everything's placed. And then what was in this other little bag is a little ESC plate, so it can replace the plastic one that comes with the kit with a carbon fiber one. I don't actually run the factory setup for ESC mounting, so I won't be able to use that, but it is kind of nice that it's there, along with two nice little carbon fiber battery holders. And so you have some little aluminum standoffs with these carbon fiber bits, and then that can replace your factory battery mount, especially as you move it rearward. Time to start making the plunge and start making this happen. Now, first thing I need to do is get anything that's taped to the chassis off. So like as of right here as an example, the receiver, but then also my ESC as well, ESC and the capacitor. They're also just double-sided tape down. And then most of the work that we're going to do is from the bottom side. Taking some bits off and transferring them over to the new chassis piece by piece by piece. Oh, look at that. That looks awesome, actually. So much slimmer of an overall design. I can't tell yet. It doesn't look like the chassis is my limiting factor up here. Barely. So it's really, really close. But, oh, man, that slimming this whole chassis down looks so nice. Clearly, my ESC is not mounted yet. I'm starting to look now at these battery holders. So if you set old chassis next to new chassis, then one of the things that you'll see is the battery holders are way up in this location. Well, what he's allowing us to do now is actually to put the battery holder back in like this location. So that's us moving that big bulk of a battery back over an inch, like 20, yeah, about 25 millimeters, something like that. You're moving that weight back to the rear. That is huge when it comes to overall chassis dynamics and getting some weight on those rear tires. So I'm going to see what I can do to make that happen, because I would be very excited to move that back. It may mean I need to do something different with where my ESC is placed, which unfortunately wires are only so long, so we'll have to see what I can do here. But that may be one of the bigger advantages that you get overall for this chassis. Created my own problem here. Again, compared to a factory RDS, I have reversed my motor and shock tower in order to make it a rear motor car, which means I've lost some of the what should be going on up here. And what I get is in this situation, as I mount the battery here, look, there's something in the way. So because I don't have that waterfall connected here between these two locations, I created a little standoff here for this top deck to mount to. That's right where the battery wants to go. So I'm going to have to get super creative. I think, just for giggles, I think what I'm going to do is just take the top deck off. And I'm going to mount the gyro down here, and I'm going to have everything. I'm not even going to have a top deck. Well, so now I need to figure out where this ESC can really sit. I can move it all the way up here, but that's going to require me to extend the ESC wires, and I don't really want to. I also don't really want to move. It's not a lot of weight, but I don't want to move this weight up forward. I like my rear weight bias. So I think I want the ESC to sit something just like this, maybe on top of where the battery is. But that means I need a little something for it to sit on. So I just went and designed and printed up this little thing. Just a little table. It's just a little silly table. Now this will work with, these are the factory body mounts. It'll also work with the aftermarket ones that come with this chassis. And you're going to be able to just slide it right in here. Longer screws through there. And then can attach the ESC right to the top of it. Plenty of room for a standard 2S LiPo shorty to then still fit underneath there. And just like that, there it is. So just some longer screws running through the bottom, some double-sided tape. ESC is mounted and ready to rock. Before we go test this, look at that. I always wanted to measure this. 1,253 grams. That is with the battery, with the body, fully loaded, ready to run. Now, compared to the last time, it's about 10 grams lighter. So it's not a big weight difference, but it is a small one. We got about 10 grams total overall lighter. And now we're 809, 65% on the rear, whereas before we were 798. Which was 63%. So we did, because of that battery moving back, you know, we lost 10 grams, but we actually added, basically 10 grams to the rear, which means the front right here is about 20 grams less. So it's 440 instead of 460. What that tells me is the most beneficial thing from this chassis is that front rear weight balance and getting that battery to move even more rearward and cutting just a little bit of weight off in the process. But now, the proof is in driving it, right? So we got to get out there, got to drive it and see how it goes. So we're going to head to my local track and get a couple laps in. Back from the track, Car did great. Really happy with this new chassis on here. It does, I think that little bit of extra rear weight bias helps me. I was able to stay in tandem with a couple of the faster cars that are on track that before I couldn't. So between the alignment settings that I've recently done and now this new chassis, I think we're really waking this car up, and it's about one of the baddest on the track, next to some cars that cost dramatically more than it, and being able to still tandem with it. So very happy with it. So this chassis is not quite yet for sale. I'll have an update whenever it gets loaded up to a place where you can actually go and purchase it, and I'll leave that down as a pinned comment down below so that you can go find that and update the video description later. So keep an eye out for those changes coming in a near future. But the other thing I did mention was that with this change, I also did an alignment change just recently. I have a whole video on it, and that's in my Redcat RDS playlist popping up over here. You may want to go check it out. Thank you, and goodbye.